Hi, everyone. This is Danelli. I am going to talk a little bit about what is the real value of a degree. I was going through some old news articles and trying to kind of revisit some statistics and information regarding college admissions, and I found this old slash recent slash prominent case. About the college admission scandal from back in 2019. Um, this here is a image from the Los Angeles Times. One of the people involved was Felicity Huffman, who's married to William H. Macy, both actors in Hollywood. I happen to be a huge fan of both of them, so this is a really interesting example for me. Um, and one of the other persons involved was Lori Loughlin, among other prominent, wealthy, famous CEOs, business owners, etc. And the scheme was started back in, I believe the investigation started back in like March of 2019. Um, It was led by William Rick Singer, who kind of started a scheme advising parents about how to get their students into prominent universities, including Yale, Stanford, University of Southern California, Georgetown, etc. I remember hearing about this a few years ago, around 2019. At the time, I believe I was at UC Santa Barbara, and I actually think I don't recall if any of the students were admitted to Santa Barbara or not. I thought they were. I thought the school was involved somehow, but I guess not. Maybe it's one of those Mengele effects that Fox Mulder talks about. Um, but in any case, uh the initial like investigation started by happenstance when some people were caught by prosecutors uh trying to pull off like an investment scheme, like buy and drop. What do they call it here in this article? Um, they call it, yeah, I think it was like originally found that like somebody gave the FBI information regarding the scheme that was happening after they were being, who was this? Oh, two public pharmaceutical companies were being investigated from a pump and dump stock scheme. And one of the people involved began to give them like information so that like they could cut a deal essentially. And that's how the investigation started. And all of this sort of like information regarding Rick Singer started to come out regarding the admission scandal, where wealthy parents forked over roughly or over 25 million dollars in total to lie and cheat their kids' way into institutions of higher learning, um, to have applications basically created for them. I think over 50 people, parents, college athletic coaches, associates of the um, university were prosecuted, including actresses Laughlin and Huffman, a few others like Gordon Kaplan, one of the uh, I think one of the students and parents that were involved in this were from China, from a CEO from China paid roughly like was it 6.5 million to get his son into Stanford. Um, so what happened was that this guy, Rick Singer, was essentially kind of like trying to get money from getting students into these colleges or universities. And he would require payments for different like things that they wanted or needed done. Either SAT scores got modified or admissions applications were created out of like thin air. They fabricated photographs, they fabricated like and photoshopped images. They completely created new profiles and new images for these students. And basically just crammed these applications with blatant outright lies. And they were all charged with a number of different things, including fraud and conspiracy, you name it. Um, his philosophy was that he had like three drawers for getting into college. And I thought, well, this is very interesting. I mean, I mean, this obviously does not excuse his crime. The philosophy, however, is not necessarily far from the truth. The front door is the traditional method of getting good grades, exceptional test scores. The back door involves donating large sums of money to the school. And then the side door is basically just cheating your way into the university. Yeah, the front door has traditionally been considered like getting good grades and exceptional test scores. Most universities need those students to have good test scores because they are competing for grants money. They are competing with other universities for like, the top students, top performing students. And they are also um, basically that is what creates their like image of either an elite university or like Ivy League university. So they really want to make sure that the majority of their students, or at least a good number of them, are able to perform um, at exceptional levels. So they require these like they have really tough admissions like expectations. The back door involves donating large sums of money. I mean, this was has always existed, for certain high profile universities, having large sums of money has always been a way of getting yourself or your students or your family noticed. You use that money in order to like highlight yourself as a candidate for the university, as a candidate, as to be a student or to be enrolled in the university. And basically, your wealth has always been used as a way of like networking into a good job, a good like marriage, a good university, a good job, you name it, or even just a good country club. So this backdoor is, not so different from the traditional way of getting a job or just like living. Like if you have money and you're able to donate and like use your money to highlight yourself as an applicant, that's always been an option. The side door is simply cheating. I mean, you can just fake it till you make it and fake it in a way that like literally becomes a crime. Um, and he certainly kind of like took it that route with these students and parents that fell for this scheme. They were paying somewhere between 15,000 and 75,000 in order to help cheat on standardized admission tests, correcting any answers, included the SATs, bribing official like proctors, bumping up scores, even having psychologists diagnose students with learning disabilities, which is, I think, really interesting. I myself struggled with a like mental health issue, and I've also required like disability assistance from universities before for either like trauma triggers or periods where I'm experiencing deep depression or intense anxiety or simply being triggered in which I can't like cope with one-on-one interactions the same way as I normally would. And so to like know that this is happening and like these students are looking for more than just, your regular kind of assistance with like using disability as an excuse, um, is very like interesting. This article points out that like They would normally only get more time to take tests. Um, but I mean, yeah, that definitely does give students with something like an SAT test more time to answer more questions correctly if they actually don't have a disability and they don't need that extra time. Bribing coaches, especially if the students were not even were not even athletes to begin with or didn't even play that sport, um, who never realistically played that sport. Parents paying anywhere between 250,000 to secure spots at USC, up to 500,000 to secure spots at USC. That's quite a lot of money. And something that I want to point out with this is that um this seems like an incredibly like stupid decision to make to some degree or to like a large extent because if you're dropping 250,000 to 500,000 on your students or your children to get them into these universities, you are much better off investing that kind of money right from the very beginning. Um, if you didn't have that kind of money at the very beginning while they were growing up, you should have found ways of investing as you went along. Because if you're going to drop that amount of money, you were better off dropping out from the very beginning, getting them actually involved in these sports, getting them actually sending them in for tutoring, actually getting, them to spend some time performing like volunteer work, having them volunteer or take internships at companies at an early age, having them take like courses in a community college before they even apply to these universities, spending money and time on like personal tutors. I know so many graduate students that would like welcome tutoring potential applicants on one-on-one to make this kind of money to help them actually learn what they need to learn in order to be admitted. Helping these students find ways of proving that they deserve to be at these universities aside from being like wealthy, rich, white kids. Um, uh, some of the sentences were like a couple weeks in prison, 250 hours of community service, a hefty fine for the crime. Um, some like as an example of what these parents ended up having to be punished with. One of the parents was based in China, who owned a company, multi-billion dollar pharmaceutical company from China. And his son went to Stanford. I believe he was expelled. They officially called it the Operation Varsity Blues. And this started when the Securities and Exchange Commission charged uh, Los Angeles executive Maury Tobin in an attempt to defraud investors, and he kind of gave them the information for this guy, Rick Singer. He pleaded guilty to racketeering, conspiracy, money laundering, uh, conspiracy to defraud, and obstruct justice. He was eligible for 65 years in prison, but I believe he only got sentenced to about three and fined $1.25 million. Wow. But I mean, this is an important story for a lot of reasons because it highlights to someone like me the lengths that some parents are willing to go in order to get their children into universities and into top universities. It's not just like bragging rights. It's not just to have them out of the house for like an extended vacation or um, to have them kind of give them time to grow up. But it's also because it's a necessity. They see it as a foundational piece to like being successful citizens and like successful members of society, in particular their society, right? Like the upper echelon or like wealthy social circles. Having at the very least a bachelor's degree for these types of families and individuals is incredibly critical and crucial. This is why moms go crazy, right? They become the soccer mom, they become the PTA mom that's like constantly pushing her kids or his or her kids to like perform and like push because they know that once you start building a family legacy of like wealthy, well-educated individuals with this piece of paper, right? It's the piece of paper legitimizes it all. They're willing to go to these lengths to get their children legitimized by a piece of paper that tells you the worth of these actual degrees. And for a place like UCSB or like USC is probably a little more expensive than the UCs, but like per year is 35,000, 35,000. So, this is just these parents are paying upwards of 250,000, 6.5 million just to get their student in. This isn't even the actual tuition. So that tells you how much in the long run these types of like degrees are worth, especially to these people. Um, so, highlights the value, it highlights the social value, the necessity of this kind of foundation. And it means a lot for someone like me, right? For BIPOC students, for Latino students, for minority students within these universities and colleges, because we're traditionally underrepresented for a reason. Traditionally, we're a very low percentage of enrolled students, and there's a high number of us. If we're enrolled in these universities, it's because we have been able to tap into diversity initiatives, equity initiatives, that have helped highlight why we should be accepted. And it has partially been because we went through the front door, right? Like exceptional test scores to prove ourselves over the course of a long period of time. This is why we're able to achieve getting sort of these huge student loans to become psychologists, to become teachers, to become like professors, to in the long run be able to enroll in PhD degrees is because generally to get admitted through the front door, you need to have proven over the course of a sustained period of time that you can perform you know, uh, at top levels in an academic manner, like in an academic way. Um, so in order for the government to give you these kinds of student loans, and after you've been admitted, this is, a different type of credit that you've earned for a sustained effort over a period of time. And, it's kind of silly to have these parents just before admissions try to like create a new image for their children. It really highlights sort of like the importance of what this kind of like um, access to education means. And also, even though it's incredibly saddening and like upsetting for someone like myself or any other BIPOC student that has had to go through all number of like hoops and academic gymnastics and intellectual gymnastics to get into these universities, it really highlights the level of pride that we should be having if we didn't have access to 250,000 or 500,000 to get into the university, let alone those of us that are still struggling to pay our student loans. And it also shows like how much of a bargain we're actually getting in regards to what some of these people are willing to pay in order to get their students into these universities and graduated by these universities. So, you at 35,000 a year for a bachelor's degree, you probably owe something like 120,000 if you didn't have any grants or loans. So this is what some of these parents at minimum probably had to pay for tuition. Someone like me who got quite a lot of grants and scholarships and graduated early because I crammed in classes over the summer, and only did 3 years out of the four, but still graduated, maybe paid 1 or 2 years off in student loans, that means I got a really great bargain just because I was performing an exceptional level academically. Um, and so that really tells you kind of like the value of the university degree in and of itself when some of these parents are paying upwards of 600,000 just to get through this entire process, if not like 6.5 million for Stanford, for example. And So this highlights also the incredible amount of like frustration that a lot of BIPOC students have expressed, especially when they have to return home and confront all manner of stereotypes that are like anti-education, quasi-fascist, if not outright fascist, regarding education and like its lack of importance in society. And um, the incredible sort of like mental health pressure that a lot of BIPOC students that are higher achievers and want to go into higher education because they need it for particular professions, either doctors or PhDs or psychiatrists or psychologists or whatever else it is. It's not just the conversation is not just about like the level of pride that they should have. It's also about the mental health and like the emotional intelligence they should have when dealing with um, the stereotypes regarding education not being needed, the um, cognitive dissonance and the gaslighting often received by interacting with members of their culture, a particular culture that praise them for being intelligent, but then at the same time kind of want to bully them because they're nerds or because they are incredibly like focused in their academic work, on all manner of other like related social issues. um, this also highlights like the issue with alternatives into to get to university level. Um, if you're going to waste this much amount of money to like just get your student into a university, you might as well have invested in your student way, way before then, or just reconsider kind of bridging your student into university through community colleges or other kinds of programs. There's so many, like other programs. There's also the military option. You can kind of like, instead of going to college or university, you could also like bridge through military enrollment. And there's so many other like options to avoid this because this really harms the educational system. It's incredibly like demoralizing for people that have worked extremely hard to get into these programs and to then discover that there's so many people there who are basically just like they don't deserve to be there. They're not actually focused on their academics. If they were focused on their academics, they would have actually been performing, to standard a long time before then. And it also highlights a level of entitlement. This is something that kind of forced me to record some of this video over was the level of entitlement that a lot of these students bring with them, right? Is that like if they knew that this was happening, um, or they're just pretending not to know, because of like their attorneys were advising them on, um, this still highlights the level of entitlement that like they're bringing to these universities and the kind of like um I think, incredibly harmful culture that creates in universities when you have groups of students that have this type of entitlement because they come from certain types of, family backgrounds that make them feel like they should be at these places. Like this is where they belong, right? This is that kind of mentality is what leads these parents and these students to like go through these lengths to get into these universities. Um, Personally, as an educator, I've come across so many students that in one way or another will let me know that they have this kind of sense of entitlement, and it's incredibly difficult to deal with them. I know that as a student, it was also incredibly difficult to deal with him. I've heard so many other students express the same or similar frustrations of dealing with colleagues, especially if they're paired up with a student that really isn't that invested in the academics, but they're there because of the social life and the, like the culture of the university, the party scene or whatever it is, and they're just there for a good time. And generally a lot of these students, since they're not so focused on the academics, I know, and I've heard of other like of like their colleagues expressing frustration that um taking the academic work isn't so important to them, and it causes them frustrations if they're put into groups to work, or um they require collaborations for a particular grade. So yeah, this is a really interesting story, and I just wanted to like use it and bring it up as an example of what I'm talking about regarding like the real value of a degree. Um, and I believe that is going to be it for this video. I think I highlighted everything that I really wanted to highlight regarding this. So yeah, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, please feel free to um, like add comments to the YouTube video, like, follow, share, comment, subscribe. Thanks so much for watching. This is Danelli. I will see you again in some other video. Bye bye.